Swordsoul is finally in Master Duel, and it's going to be a massive metagame contender for the next few months. If you're hitting ladder, you're going to be seeing this deck a lot. So, we're going to be going over how Swordsoul plays and what their options are in depth, not just so that you can play the deck, but also so you know how to beat it when you see it on ladder. Swordsoul is best described as a mid-range deck. Mid-range decks usually end on narrow boards of 1 or 2 monsters with a lot of other types of interaction. Other mid-range decks are stuff like Zodiac, Virtual World, or Invoke Dogmatica. The deck shines best in simplified game states, but doesn't have as strong of a resource loop as other mid-range decks like Virtual World or Invoked. The Swordsoul deck uses 3 main deck Swordsoul monsters, each with 2 effects. One, where you have to meet a unique condition to special summon a level 4 tuner Swordsoul token, and another effect that activates when the monster is used as synchro material. When Swordsoul of Moye is normal or special summoned, he can generate a token by revealing any Swordsoul or Worm card from your hand. His other effect is to draw a card when he's used as synchro material. Swordsoul of Taya banishes any Swordsoul or Worm card from your graveyard to create the token, and can mill any Swordsoul or Worm card from your deck to the graveyard when he's used as synchro material. Swordsoul Strategist Longwan is the only Swordsoul monster that can special summon himself. He does so by discarding any Swordsoul or Worm card from your hand. When summoned this way, he generates his token, and when he's used as synchro material, he deals 1200 burn damage to the opponent. Now, while the Swordsoul token is on the field, you're unable to special summon from the extra deck except for synchro summons, so most of our combos are going to be relying on synchro plays. Your ideal starter is Swordsoul of Moye, so to help find Moye, we're running 2 cards, Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous, and Swordsoul Emergence. Incredible Ecclesia can tribute itself to special summon any Swordsoul from the deck, which can trigger Moye's ability to special summon a token by revealing a worm. This is the ideal target for Ecclesia on turn 1. Additionally, you can special summon this card for free if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, making it absolutely insane going second. Emergence allows you to add any Swordsoul monster from your deck to your hand, with a few more intricacies that we'll be going over later. So what's your basic play? Ideally, you have a way to Moye, and with Moye, you can reveal a Swordsoul or Worm card to make their level 8 synchro, Swordsoul Grandmaster Shishao. Shishao has 2 effects, however, you can only use one of them per turn. The first is the most relevant going first. When it's synchro summoned, it allows you to add or banish any Swordsoul card from your deck. The other effect gives you interaction during your opponent's turn. It allows you to target any monster on the field and negate its effects, similar to Infinite Impermanence. Now, when you make Shishao, you'll have 2 effects that you can activate at the same time. One is Shishao's effect to add, and Moye's effect to draw, because he was used as synchro material. Because these effects activate in the same time, it means you can add them to the chain link in whatever order you'd like. Cards like Ash Blossom can only respond to the most recent card in the chain, so if you make Shishao Chainlink 1 and Moye Chainlink 2, Ash will only be able to stop Moye's draw effect and not Shishao's search effect. We call this chain blocking, and it's very important to know to make your combo a lot more resilient to Ash Blossom. Now for what we actually search from Shishao's effect. If you have another Worm or Swordsoul card in your hand, we always go for Longwan to continue our combo. If we already have the Longwan, but no pitch fodder, we want to search for one. I generally go for Taya, although it doesn't matter too much. If we already have both of these, we want to search for Swordsoul Blackout. Swordsoul Blackout is the archetypal trap card, and it lets you target 1 Worm monster on your side of the field and 2 cards on your opponent's side of the field, destroying all 3 of them. Now, back to the Longwan combo. We have 2 main level 10 synchros that we go into, Baron de Fleur and Chen Ying. On your turn, Baron is able to destroy 1 card on the field, and during either player's turn, it functions as an Omni-Negate. Chen Ying is the archetypal boss monster with 3 effects. The first is a continuous effect, where for each card in either banish pile, Chen Ying gains 100 attack and defense, with your opponent's monsters losing the same amount. Its second effect gives it Thunder Dragon Colossus-esque protection, where if it would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish any card from your graveyard instead. This synergizes with its third effect, which is a once per turn, where if a card is banished, you can banish 1 card from both your opponent's field and graveyard without targeting. If you have a Blackout, you can target Chen Ying, use his own effect to protect himself, also forcing a card to be banished and activating his third effect. Shishao's Negate effect that we talked about earlier also requires a Swordsoul or Worm monster to be banished from your graveyard, which also triggers Chen Ying's banishing effect. So to recap the basic endboard, Shishao lets you negate any monster on the field. You have either non-targeting banishes with Chen Ying or an Omni-Negate with Baron, and Blackout gives you 2 pops by either destroying Shishao or having Chen Ying protect himself. Which one is better is usually dependent on the matchup, but I generally like going for Baron de Fleur over Chen Ying, as I feel like Chen Ying is better in simplified game states. So before we move on to the Tenyi cards in the extra deck, I want to quickly talk about Archnemesis Protos. Protos is a worm that can only be special summoned from your hand by banishing 3 monsters from your field or graveyard with different attributes. His effect on the field is insane, letting you declare 1 attribute that's present on the field, then all cards with that attribute are destroyed. Then, until the end of the next turn, neither player can special summon monsters with that attribute. This essentially lets you skip turns of decks like Drytron by calling Light, Emancipator by calling Earth, or Phantom Knights by calling Dark. To get Protos on the field, you have to adjust your combo slightly, by searching for Swordsoul Emergence with Shishao if you didn't previously use it in the turn. Swordsoul Emergence has another effect, where if you control a Synchro monster, you can add any war monster from your deck instead of just a Swordsoul card. Doing this, you can add Protos, and the Tenyi cards we're about to talk about will help facilitate his summoning condition. This card shines best in a best of 3 format, but is still incredibly good here, especially going second. If you can, absolutely find Protos lines. This card will single-handedly win you games. Now we'll move on to the other archetype featured in the Swordsoul deck, the Tenyi monsters. All the Tenyis are worm monsters with 2 once per turn effects. 1 to special summon themselves, and 1 to banish themselves for an effect. Their effects to special summon themselves all have the same condition. If you control no monsters, or you only control non-effect monsters, you can special summon these cards from your hand. Their second effect lets you banish them from your hand or graveyard if you control a non-effect monster for either extending your combos or board breaking. So first off, the Swordsoul token counts as a non-effect monster for these effects, but we also have Monk of the Tenyi, a Link 1 non-effect monster that you can make with any Tenyi monster. This sets up your non-effect monster on the field, while also putting the Tenyi cards in your grave to get value out of their effects. Tenyi Spirit Vishuddha lets you banish itself to return one of your opponent's cards to the hand. This is any card, and not just monsters, so you can force out negates or trap cards before committing to your Swordsoul plays. It's also a fantastic way for dealing with floodgates like Skill Drain. Tenyi Spirit Adara banishes itself to add a banished worm to your hand. Ashana is what really helps out with our combos. Ashana lets you banish itself to special summon a Tenyi from the deck, however you can only special summon worm monsters for the rest of this turn. This locks us out of Baron de Flor, but is otherwise not that much of an issue. The only other Tenyi that we run is Shutana. Its effect is terrible, it never really comes up. We only run it because it's a level 4 and that makes it easier to synchro summon. We also run Heavenly Dragon Circle, a quick play spell that lets us tribute a worm monster to add any worm monster from our deck to our hand. If you tributed a non-effect monster, like Monk of the Tenyi, you can special summon it from the deck instead with its effects negated. Now, how do these cards help us? As mentioned earlier, they synergize with our Swordsoul effects in the Swordsoul token. They're all worms, so you can pitch them for Long 1 or reveal them for Moye. They also give us more versatile access to Shishao. Adara is a level 1 tuner, while Vishuddha and Ashuna are both level 7 non-tuners. This turns any hand with Ashuna and either Adara or Vishuddha into a Shishao without even using your normal summon. We start this combo by specialing Ashana from our hand and making a Monk of the Tenyi, then summoning either Vishuddha or Adara from your hand, and activating Ashuna's effect to get the Tenyi that you didn't draw onto the field. This gives you a level 8 synchro play, so we can make Shishao to search Long 1. Using Adara's graveyard effect, we can put our banished Ashana back into our hand so that we can discard it with Long 1 to make a Chenying. Circle gives you a way to convert your Monk of the Tenyi into any other Tenyi or Swordsoul card in your deck, but it being a quick play, has other interactions with your Swordsoul cards. If you activate the effect of Moye or Taya, and your opponent activates a card that negates it by targeting, such as Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, or their own Shishao, you can chain Circle to tribute your monster, making it no longer on the field, so the effect still resolves and you get the token. You can then get Shitana with Circle and summon it since you don't control any effect monsters, but you do control the token. This then makes Shishao and gets your combo back on track. Now let's take a closer look at the extra deck. We can split the extra deck up into 4 categories. Level 8s that we can access with Moye, Taya, or Tenyi lines, Level 10s that we can access with Long 1, the Tenyi Link monsters that we can access with the Tenyi cards, and we run 2 odd cards that we'll get to later. For level 8s, the standard list runs 2 Shishao, which we've already gone over. We also run 2 Baxia, Brightness of the Yangzing. When Baxia is synchro summoned, you can shuffle cards on the field back into the deck up to the number of different attributes that you use to synchro summon Baxia. All of the Tenyi monsters are different attributes from each other, so when you summon Baxia with the Tenyis, you'll always be able to shuffle 2 cards. The Swordsoul token's attribute is Water, so in making Baxia with Moye, you only get 1 shuffle, but making it with Taya gives you the 2 shuffles. Its second effect lets you destroy 1 card you control to special summon any level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard, so after you've used Baxia, you can destroy it to continue your combos. It's worth noting that Baxia is only a soft once per turn, so if you summon another Baxia, you can use both effects again. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi doesn't really synergize with any of our Tenyi cards, but it's excellent for breaking boards. Its first effect lets you banish an opponent's monster if it activates its effect, however, this doesn't negate the effect. Its second effect lets it absorb the attack of a monster it destroys by battle, then letting it attack twice. We also run Dragite. Dragite is a spell and trap negate if you have either Moye or Shitana in your graveyard, making it excellent for control matchups where Shishao falls flat, like against Sky Striker or Eldritch. For the level 10s, our go-tos are Baron and Chenying as described before. Our other option is Ruddy Rose Dragon, which is a little bit niche. When Ruddy Rose Dragon is synchro summoned, you can banish all cards from both players' graveyards, and it can tribute itself to prevent any effect that would destroy cards in the field. This is good for grindier matchups where your opponent is relying on some kind of graveyard recursion. We run 3 Monk of the Tenyi to get our Tenyis in the graveyard, and trust me, you will regret cutting this down to 2. We run one other Link monster, Shaman of the Tenyi, which is made with any 2 worm monsters. Shaman lets us discard a card to special summon any worm monster from our graveyard, however it has kind of an awkward lock. You can't activate the effects of monsters summoned from the extra deck this turn, except for Tenyi monsters. However, you can bypass this by special summoning a synchro monster from the graveyard. Because it wasn't technically summoned from the extra deck this turn, you can activate its effect. So the 2 odd cards we run are 1 level 7 and 1 level 9 monster. The way we access the level 7 is a combination of Emergence and Taya. Taya's effect lets us banish a Swordsoul card from our graveyard to get the token. This includes Emergence, which triggers its second effect. When Emergence is banished, you can increase or decrease the level of a card you control by 1. The level 7 we're accessing with the Taya line is Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing. Yazi is a combo and board breaker in 1. Yazi lets you target 1 Yang Zing monster you control, itself, and 1 card your opponent controls to destroy both of them. Its second effect lets you special summon any worm monster from your deck if it's destroyed in a battle or card effect. This gives you access to any Tenyi or Swordsoul line that you want, including Moye. We run 1 level 9 in Chaofeng. Chaofeng can be made through Taya's level manipulation, but we don't really want to do that. What we want to do is make it with Baxia and Adara, a level 8 synchro monster and our level 1 tutor. When you make Chaofeng with a Yang Zing monster, so Baxia or Yazi, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters with the Yang Zing's original attributes. So making it with Baxia means Drytron cannot play the game, and making it with Yazi means Phantom Knights has to scoop it up. It's a little bit more awkward making it with Yazi, requiring you to use Emergence's Banish effect, but it's still a win condition versus certain decks. There is another variant to Swordsoul that makes use of the Tenyis being easily able to make Crystron Halqifibrax. This version adds Crystron Halqifibrax, Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon, and Deskbot 001. The basic combo goes like this. You make Halqifibrax with any tuner and non-tuner monster, usually your Tenyis. The card Halqifibrax summons for the deck is Deskbot 001. You then make Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon with Halq and the 001. Auroradon's effect summons 3 level 3 tokens, which triggers 001's effect to special summon itself from the grave, giving you 3 level 3 non-tuners and a level 1 tuner. This gives you access to Baron de Floor without Longwan and before your normal summon, or it lets you go into Yazi if you're going second. This cuts Ruddy Rose Dragon and Dragite from the extra deck to fit the Halq and Auroradon, as well as running a third Adara over the usual 2 to have more hands with Halq access. They also tend to run Vessel for the Dragon Cycle over Heavenly Circle, which makes finding 2 Tenyis for Halqifibrax even easier. The Halqifibrax package saw massive success in the TCG, with most topping variants using it. Another option Swordsoul has is running the Destiny Hero package. Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is a new fusion card coming out along with the Swordsoul cards. You're going to be seeing a lot of them, so let's analyze what he brings to a deck. Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, or DPE, has 3 effects. The first is similar to Chen Ying, a continuous 200 attack debuff for each hero card in your graveyard. His second effect is a quick effect that lets you destroy 1 card you control and any other card on the field without targeting. Its third effect activates whenever it's destroyed by battle or card effect, including his own card effect. It lets you bring back any Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard during the next standby phase, including himself. DPE gives you recurring value each turn, destroying itself and an opponent's card, then bringing itself back next turn to do the same thing. This is pretty good, but how well does a fusion card actually synergize with our synchro deck? Turns out, insanely well. The card we use to fusion summon this guy is Fusion Destiny. Fusion Destiny lets us use cards from our deck to fusion summon, with the restriction that we essentially cannot special summon for the rest of the turn after we use this card, and the card we bring out is destroyed at the end of next turn. DPE really doesn't care about that second restriction, because it'll just activate his effect to come back anyways. As for the first restriction, as long as we wait until the end of our combo to activate Fusion Destiny, that restriction doesn't really matter either. This is also really helpful for recovering some kind of board in case we get Nibiru'd. The cards we use from the deck to fusion summon are Destiny Hero Dasher and Destiny Hero Celestial, each with graveyard effects that can help out almost any deck. These cards are really good to have in our deck because they facilitate Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, but they're otherwise garnets, or cards that we really don't want to have in our hand, but are engine requirements. Destiny Hero Dasher has a graveyard effect that lets you special summon a monster you drew during the draw phase once per duel. Destiny Hero Celestial's graveyard effect lets you draw 2 cards if your hand is empty by banishing itself and Dasher from the graveyard. Though this can't be done the turn that you send it to the graveyard, it has to be done the turn later. We also run Protoplant, Verte, Anaconda in our extra deck, a Link 2 whose Link materials are any 2 effect monsters. This doesn't synergize well with the Swordsoul token, but it's strong enough that we don't really care about this anti-synergy. Verte lets you pay 2,000 life points to send any fusion card from the deck to the graveyard and copy its effect, essentially making Fusion Destiny a searchable card by converting any 2 bodies on the field into Verte Anaconda. This engine is going to be all over the place, and not just for Swordsoul. Any deck that can get 2 bodies on the board to make Verte Anaconda will want to run this card. So here are the lists for each variant I talked about, all of which can also be found in the description. I've included Pure Swordsoul, the Tenyi variant, the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer variant, and the Halqifibrax variant. I've based these lists on topping TCG and OCG lists, adjusting the TCG lists for the fact that if Max C resolves, you automatically lose the game against any competent strategy. Now, how do you beat Swordsoul? Ash Blossom is only okay against this deck. You can stop the Swordsoul Emergence, Ecclesia, Ashuna, Halqifibrax, or Heavenly Circle, but you only get insanely good value from stopping the Ecclesia due to them having already committed their normal summon. Them using the Ecclesia going second is a different story, however. You're going to want to Ash the Ecclesia anyways, because if they're summoning Ecclesia, there's not much else for you to use the Ash on, but they can still follow up with a Moye from hand, if they hard drew it. Ashing Ashuna is alright, but the same problem as before, if they haven't committed to their normal summon, they can still do the full combo with Moye. Halqifibrax is an Ash magnet. Even if they haven't committed to their normal summon, you really can't let this card resolve. Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler are 2 insanely good hand traps against Swordsoul. They can stop the Moye, Halqifibrax, or Shishao not being able to be chain blocked. If you have an Infinite Impermanence, you want to analyze the game state and make a call. If they've already committed their normal summon, you should generally be free to fire it off on their Moye or Halqifibrax. If they haven't, it might be better to save that Impermanence for your turn to force out a negate. Forbidden Chalice is another excellent staple going forward. You can set it to stop the Moye going first, or going second you can force out the Barone negation or turn the Chengying completely offline. Chalice is very likely to rise in popularity on Master Duel, similar to how it did in the TCG. Nibiru is generally pretty good against this deck. The Swordsoul can have some high roll hands that make Barone to floor before 5 summons, but you can force out the Baron negation with the Nibiru in the worst case scenarios, since Barone can only negate once while it's face up on the field and not once per turn. The best case scenario is that you use Nibiru after they activated a long wand that they searched with Shishao. Once they summon the token, that'll be 5 summons. Nibiru is less strong against the Halqifibrax variant, where the best time to Nibiru is after the 001 is summoned from the graveyard, meaning the opponent likely still hasn't committed to a normal summon. Max C, as usual, is the most skillless card in the entire game and forces Swordsoul to end their turn unless they have an out to it. If Swordsoul is going second, they're going to have access to Vishuddha and Ecclesia as free extenders to break your board or force interaction. You can try to get Monk of the Tenyi off the field before Vishuddha or the other Tenyis can activate their effects, but if they have another Tenyi in their hand, this essentially wastes another point of interaction on your field. If you have some kind of destruction by the time they start the Swordsoul line, it's generally preferable to destroy the tokens instead of the Swordsoul cards. It keeps their worms out of the grave for a bit, and it's harder for them to get another tuner on the board than another non-tuner. That about covers it. There's a lot more niche interactions between cards, but there are way too many to cover in this video. If this video does well, I'll try to make some gameplay videos with and against Swordsoul at high levels, because I will definitely be crafting this deck, as well as more guides for decks coming in the future, like Floanderiz or Despia.